Hey everybody, welcome to the second in a series of meta-analysis as we look at decks as they evolve in the meta. Recently, Konami released a ban list that's going to shake up the meta pretty good, so we're looking at decks and how they're affected and where they're going. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Element Sabers, so we brought in a good friend of ours that's on the show a lot. He was number one global KC Cup in November. He was number three global in the KC Cup in February. You might know him as Tadashi, but we know him as -1. How's it going, buddy?
Hey, thanks for having me.
We're always glad to have you on the show. So this is the deck that you took first place with and third place with, right?
The archetype, Element Saber Invoked, it's a pretty good deck. Really has a lot of options, and yeah.
So did you how did you feel when you saw it got hit? Were you like, oh, it's time, it's time?
Yeah, it was the best deck in the November KC Cup, and it was the a really strong deck in the February KC Cup. So it's like, it's understandable that Konami would want to hit a deck like that, just because it's preventing other decks from potentially coming into the game and becoming meta.
Right. Okay. So the list came out. We were waiting and waiting for this list to come out. It finally comes out, and they introduces something new: a limit to three. I mean, we've had limit one, limit two. Now we got limit three. They put Palace of the Elemental Lords on there and Cosmic Cyclone on there. How does this impact the deck?
It does affect the building of the deck a bit. It also kind of hurts the consistency. The strategy isn't too different.
All right. So how does you said it did affect it in what way?
So because Palace and Cyclone are at 3, um, you can't run Cyclone. Well, it's like you can run Cyclone, but because Palace is such a good card, you want 3 in your deck. So you kind of have to using Cosmic Cyclone just so that you have 3 Palace.
So Cosmic is a lot of removal, like especially like back row spot removal. So what did you do to kind of build that up? Because that would obviously be something that was lost. So how did you compensate?
In the example
Post
build
ban,
I
yeah.
have here, instead of Cyclone, I added Bad Aim, and including, or I guess this build includes a light Element Saber. So these are really good for handling back row heavy strategies. Um, Overall, Bad Aim is good at, it can pop monsters as well, so it's not just for back row use. But
So what was the strength of the deck before the ban list?
the strength of Element Sabers is really that they can grind through anything as long as they have Palace and monster or like Element Saber effects.
Okay.
So something you see in a lot of other decks that you don't see in Element Sabers is hard removal. Other than Cosmic Cyclone, the deck didn't have anything that would destroy or send to graveyard the way you would see in like Black Queens or Dark Lords. So Element Sabers, what they really would excel at is controlling the pace of the game by flipping down monsters, and then when the opponent has to at some point put multiple monsters onto the field just so that they can play through the one flip down, that's when Element Sabers summons Purg or Purgatrio, and because they have multiple monsters, you inflict a lot of damage because Purg attacks all of them.
Now, yeah, so you got to get Alistair out to do that usually to get your invocation out so you can summon your Purgatrio. You can't do it as easily now because they hit the skill, right? Sorcery Conduit.
Yeah. So Conduit now at 1500. It kind of makes it questionable whether or not you should even run the skill. So in the build that I have presented, I think that Destiny Draw may be like a better alternative,
Okay.
just because 1500 is kind of high, and at some point you have to ask how much is Alistair worth it over just drawing any card in your deck. You know?
Right.
So obviously from the pre-ban list deck, pretty much everything up through like Invocation, you got the 3 palaces, but your back row changed a lot. What changed from you where you wanted to take out Wall of D, put in Floodgates, Bad Aims, take out the Clash, stuff like that?
So because well, one of the key things that made Sabers so effective earlier was that with Cyclone, they have multiple copies of Alistair. However, without the easy access with Sorcery Conduit, you don't have that heightened consistency. Sorry. So you want to have a smaller deck just so that you will see Alistair more. But you do have the skill to draw it, but once again, like you want to have a smaller deck so that you don't have to rely on the skill every time.
Okay, so because you're playing Destiny Draw, the first thing that came to my mind was something like Mirror Wall. Where would you think that would fit in? If it fits in.
Okay. The thing is that the meta really defines what back row you use in Sabers. So Mirror Wall may be decent for mirror matches or say Dark Lords. Because the new ban list dropped and the new box dropped, it's really undefined what back row you should be using. So that's why we're sticking with Floodgates and Fiendish Chain.
So have you got to test this deck out yet?
I have gotten to test it a little bit. I haven't fully checked out how it fares against all of the new decks in the new box, just because there's so much to test and so much to look into.
Okay.
So from pre-ban list to post-ban list, what do you think its good matchups, bad matchups are? What changed?
For the ban list, the only bad matchup for Element Sabers was really Dark Magician, just because they had a lot of removal and they generated a lot of card advantage through Circle, through Rod, through Banish. After the ban list, Dark Magician is still pretty difficult, but a few other decks may be a little harder, just because you don't have Cosmic Cyclone. Those would most likely be Cyber Dragons and Dark Lords. So Dark Lords, they usually don't Sanctified because it will get Cosmic Cycloned. However, because Element Sabers are in a spot where Cosmic Cyclone hurts their consistency, they have to run 3 Palace and no Cyclone. Therefore, Dark Lords can set Sanctified, which is very good for their grind game. And again, Cyber Dragons, they're very... they have very strong back row. However, if you can Cyclone it off, then it gives them a hard time. But without Cyclone, Cyber Dragons can steamroll Element Sabers in some cases.
Awesome. So I'd love to have you back on in like a week or two and ask you how the deck is doing and where it's going. If you think it's still going to be a top deck in the meta, so or how it's doing. Do you think it's going to win the next KC Cup? All that kind of good stuff. So we'd love to have you back on and talk about that. So once again, everybody, thanks for showing up tonight. I'm Celebrity Circus. That's Herf. If you like what you saw here, make sure to follow us on Twitch, follow us on Twitter, join our Discord. What else they got to do, Herf?
Hit the notification bell to make sure you know when we upload.
That's right. Do all that good stuff. Links are down below in the chat. Thanks for coming out, Neg. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys, take it easy.